I could not make a corresponding determination. Billy says you already know a great deal of things. Semyaza says, which brings us back to the subject, which would be, namely, the future. Billy says, right, then yes, you can now begin. Semyaza says, I will do this, otherwise, we will drift more and more away from it. Thus, it will happen that the future will bring events which, on the one hand, will have a very malicious effect on the world and earth people, but which, on the other hand, will only be confirmation of what has been announced prophetically for several thousand years. Especially now, it also confirms what has been said since ancient times, that the Israeli people originally never were an actual people, but that this mass of people, in ancient times, singly and alone consisted of a gigantic group of degenerate and partially even criminal elements, who during their existence on earth at that time only incited discord, falseness and war. Having come forth from the ones who were expelled, because they would not obey any order and were criminal, they assembled together in a mob in ancient times and formed the sham people of the Hebrons, the Gypsies, who in their megalomania and in selfishness and egoism, named themselves a chosen people, who wanted to take up an elevated and ruling position over all terrestrial peoples, as is indeed known to you. But you also know that the sham people over a very long time always reached its goals, however, always only through murder, arson, the betrayal of friendships, and intrigues, and so forth, whereby they, the original forefathers of today's Israelis, were truly masters. Their distant descendants now, today's Israelis, that is their responsible ones and their myrmidons, can, like the USA, commit the worst crimes pitilessly and unhindered and with their secret services and military, right before the eyes of the world at large, and even with their approval. Not only that the Secret Service and military have criminal elements and trustworthy friends in many nations of earth, who they, as ever, simply brutally and bloodthirstily butcher as needed and to reach their goals. No, they also have, again like the USA, through their intrigues, also understood how to make the appropriate friends in the governments, the economic concerns and banks, and so forth, or even creep into these themselves, so that their power has already grown to the degree that this cannot be grasped and perceived by earth humans anymore. The last World War, the second, through which millions of Jews were massacred, which was truly unjust as you know, carries the great blame that this could even happen to such a degree, also because the USA with its allies decided the war in their favor. But blinded by that and full of false pity, earth humans seek the friendship of the violent ones, but who in no way merit this friendship and only take advantage of it for their criminal purposes. A fact. Billy says, man alive, you must be damned cautious about what you say here, because all of this could be interpreted as being neo-fascist and anti-Jewish. You also know that anti-Semitic machinations and the like constantly led to legal procedures and even worse. Semyaza says, but these explanations are necessary for what I have to tell you in this context. Billy says that may well be, but in spite of that, it is dangerous. It could endanger our entire mission, or at least attract murder attempts around my neck again. Semyaza says, if you are frightened, then we can abandon our mission. Billy says, certainly not, but I ask myself whether I did right in this, to have questioned you regarding future events, when you now so openly speak of these things, which correspond to truth as I know, but which are damned hot. Semyaza says, I would have also spoken about it, if you had not asked me about future matters. Billy says, I understand. Seemingly the coming world situation requires this. Semyaza says, sure. Billy says, but in spite of that, this means quite a damned danger. Semyaza says that also is correct, and it especially means a very great danger for yourself and for your life, because the fewest earth humans will understand and want to understand that we only speak the truth and only spread the truth regarding these things, and that we ourselves, as well as you, in spite of that, regarding the people themselves, do not possess anti-American and anti-Israeli ambitions in any form and in regard to the integrity of these countries. Only few will understand that we only object to the murderous and false machinations of these named groups of Earth humans, and have to warn the rest of mankind about them being the criminal state powers and the myrmidons and servants who belong to them, who, for their delusion and fanaticism as well as for their serfdom and profit greed, go, without consideration, over corpses, murdering, destroying and terrorizing. Billy says naturally, but this explanation will probably not help much. Semyaza says that maybe, however some will absorb the truth in spite of that. Billy says that's a lot of damned use to me, if I'm thereby to go to hell. Semyaza says you can unfetter yourself from your duty, if you are afraid, which you have, however, never done before. Billy says naturally not, because you indeed know that I cannot simply break a given promise. On the other hand, I ask myself why you suddenly came upon the crazy idea that I should be afraid. Should this perhaps be a psychological trick to cause me to persevere? Do you want to strike at my honor, so to speak, and thereby also address my own feelings of honor? That would be quite mean of you, because you know very precisely that I then, Semyaza says, you lose yourself in words which you yourself do not accept as given. And you know also that I would never approach you with such ulterior motives. Billy says naturally, that would also be new to me. I only wanted to know the depth of your thoughts. Therefore calmly tell me further, I will persevere, whether the devil comes out or stays in. Semyaza says I knew that. Billy says then this small skirmish was superfluous. Semyaza says sure. But now listen what I have already said, I had to explain, because the following can only be understood thereby you know about the intrigues of the responsible ones, which are established through their secret service, and are advanced or set off through revolutions and wars throughout the world. But you also know that through the American, Soviet and Israeli Secret Service, assassination attempts and political murders are committed in very great numbers, and that the same secret services set off political confusions and topple governments, and so forth. But what is still unknown to you and the Earth humans is the fact that in many revolutions and smaller wars the powers directly take part and commit monstrous crimes. Not only that they do not submit to the world order regarding atomic regulations, and continue to conduct nuclear trials and so forth, and consequently contravene all rules and regulations, no, they also pilfer and rob the required materials by murder and manslaughter. But far worse things yet are carried out through the military and through the secret service, in that they directly interfere in revolutions and wars of other peoples, and commit hundredfold and thousandfold murders. This, however, they do in the cunning and infamous manner, that everything looks as if the directly involved ones, or any subgroups of these, are the guilty ones. Thus have US, America and Israel already also directly interfered in the war between Iraq and Iran, in the breaking out of which they were likewise not uninvolved. Secret Service special commandos, chiefly in Iraq, commit criminal and war criminal acts and undertakings, as also Israeli bombers openly bombard principal Iraqi positions, cities and atomic and oil centers, with the assumption that it would not be noticed that this concerns their military interference and their murderous cunning. However, they deceive themselves in this regard, because at least we are aware of their filthy machinations and let these be given world publicity through you. Billy says, and you are of the opinion that the Earth humans will take this off of me, if I lay this before them or try to explain. Semyaza says a small group will recognize that you speak the truth. Billy says that's much use then. Just consider that at this time there are more than 4 billion humans, who must be convinced of the truth. Especially in US, America and Israeli-friendly Switzerland, as well as in Germany, France and in America, hell will be made hot for me when I spread your explanations further. Semyaza says sure, because in these nations especially the evil powers have made many friends in governments and among the people, or they have their own people sit in authoritative governments and in the economic and financial world. Billy says,